Hey, what's going on, guys? So in this video, what I'm going to be doing is building out an image slider for an e-commerce website for a product page. So if you take a look at the screen right here, we just have these products and we're able to navigate through this page by hovering over each product right here. And we can use this slider right here to actually switch between the products. So this is actually a website that I'm building out for my wife. I'm currently working on her website, switching it to WordPress, where she sells these filters for a program called Lightroom. So I'm just rebuilding the website, making it a little bit more customizable for her, and just changing things up. So I didn't want to use a plugin. I didn't want to do anything else like that. I just wanted to build out my own slider. So I took some time, did some research, and this is what we're going to be building today. So I'm going to build this out, and then later on we'll work on transitioning to that in other videos. But we're just going to build out this one page website, and then I'm going to put out a demo. And also I'm going to try filming this a little bit differently, where I'm talking to the camera the whole time. So you might notice I'm a little bit less organized, but we're just going to see how it goes, and let's go ahead and just get started. So again, here's the website. And also really quick, we're going to put this into Django. So we're going to start with just HTML and CSS. So if you look at the URL, this is just a folder we just created. It's static right now, but later on we will put this into a Django website. So for any of you guys that are Django developers, I'm going to show you the Django app, and then we'll just talk about how I built that and how we can make this more dynamic. So let's go into my code here, and I'm going to minimize the site. And what I'm going to do is open up the site that I'm currently going to be working on. So if you look at my file structure, I just created a folder here, and we just have an images folder, an index page, and style.css. So for my styling, and if I click on index right here, you'll also have this source code. It'll open up our blank website. So what we're seeing in the browser right here is our website right here. So here's our folders. Our CSS is going to be on the right, and I'll open that up. And in here, we just have the boilerplate HTML files. We gave it a title. We made sure that our website can adjust for a mobile view. And we also added in Bootstrap. And I'm only going to use this once just for a button that I'm going to add. But I am also going to work with Flexbox. So that's what I'm going to do with the layout later. But let's go ahead and start actually adding in the items. So in my body right here, the way I'm going to build this is I'm going to have one image that's going to be the focus of the entire page. So that's going to be our main image. And then I'm going to put in multiple images underneath. And once we hover over those images, we're going to grab that image attribute, and we're going to replace that featured image with the image that we just hovered over. So in my images folder, if I drag in the entire folder here, I'll show you the images that we have. So these will also be in the source code. Actually, I need to bring those in, so give me a second here, and I'll pull those in from the demo here. So we have all of these images, and I'm just going to copy those and paste them into the file that we're currently working on. So now that we have those images, we're going to start working with these, and let's import the first one. So I want a featured image right now, and I'm just going to go into the images folder. So we're going to go into this folder, and let's start with shoe1.jpg. So images /shoe1.jpg, and that should give us our featured image. So we're going to throw in our first image, and I'm going to look at my demo code on the right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to give this image right here an ID of featured. So we want to know which image we're working with. And I'm going to paste in some CSS code. So make sure I spell featured right there. And I'm going to paste in the code into my style.css. So right now we're going to access it by the ID, and we're going to set max width, max height. And we're also going to make sure that when we hover over it, we see that cursor. So we see that the pointer there, and we want to give it a border. So object fit, what this is going to do is if our image is too big, we're going to make sure that it doesn't somehow stretch that image. We're just going to zoom in on one part of it, and it's going to make sure that we don't distort it. So if we go back to our page, we have our featured image. Now it has the border, and I want to add in some images underneath here. So let me open up the demo again. So I'm going to paste in some images, and let's copy this one actually. So let's throw in a few of them. So instead of the ID of featured, we're going to give this a class of thumbnail. So class is equal to thumbnail, and I'm going to drag in the CSS for that. So the CSS for thumbnail, we're just going to make sure that we also do that object fit so it doesn't stretch that image, and we're going to give it a max width of 180 pixels and a max height of 100 pixels. And we also want to make sure that when we hover over it, we see that finger pointer there. And we also want to set the opacity. So before that image is hovered over, we want to make sure that it's kind of blurred out like we saw in the demo. And you'll see what that looks like in a second, but we just added some margin and a border to that. So I'm going to save that. Let's open up the browser again, and we should see that one image here. For some reason, I'm not seeing it. Okay, I'm pulling up the raw image. So let's go to, actually that should work. So I should save both of those. I guess I didn't save the HTML. So there we go. That's our featured image. And if you notice, the color looks a little bit different. So I'll zoom in. The opacity is making that a little bit transparent. So we're going to grab this image and we're going to throw that in 3 times. And I also want to give this image the class of active. So whenever an image is active, the opacity is going to be a solid 1. So when we hover over it, what we're going to do is we're going to take this class of active, we're going to remove it from the current image, and we're going to add it to the image that we're currently hovered over. So this active class is going to navigate between these 3. And if I go to the CSS, I'm going to throw in some more CSS for that thumbnail. So whenever we hover over it, the opacity is going to change. And I'm going to throw or refresh that. And let's actually change this up a little bit. So we want to make sure that this is image or shoe 2 and shoe 3. So we have all of those, and now we can test it. Okay, so there are 3 images. And as we hover, you notice the color changes, but we're not replacing the image yet. So let's go into active here. So whenever an image is active, it should also have the opacity of 1 right here. So remember, we added that to the first image. So the opacity is going to be by default 1, and we want that image to correlate with the featured image. So now the featured image should already be open, so we should know where we're at on the current page. So before we start styling our image, what we want to do is add in those hover effects. So as we change this, we're going to start changing that class, and then we'll add in styling after that. So let's add the JavaScript right into our index.html file, and we're going to put that on the bottom of the page. So what we want to do first is we want to grab all of the thumbnails, and I'm just going to paste in some code here. So for the variable, we're going to use let, and we're going to set the value of thumbnails to get all of these thumbnails by the class name. So we're going to get all of those thumbnails, and we also want to get the active images. So we want to get the images that have the class of active right here. So we're going to get 2 query sets, and we're going to get them by the class name. And we want to add in our first event handler. So I'm going to paste in the beginning of a loop right here, and then I'll just explain what's going on and we'll start finishing this up. So right here, what we're going to do is we're going to start looping through all of these classes right here. So we're going to loop through all the classes of thumbnail, and we're going to set the value of I to 0. We're going to start that loop right here, and we want to add the event handler for that mouse over. So on each iteration, what we want to do is we want to index thumbnails and grab the one in the current iteration and just do add event listener. And the event that we want to trigger this on is going to be on mouse over. So mouse over, make sure I spelled that right. And on mouse over, we're going to write in a function here. We want to grab that, the class of active, and we want to add it to the next item. So I'm going to paste in a conditional here, and this is going to be inside of my loop here. So thumbnails, we're going to add the event listener on mouse over. I added this as a conditional. So first we're going to check the active classes. This is why we made this a query set. So we're going to go through the query set with everything that has the class name of active, and we're going to check if that is below 0. So the reason why we're doing this is because if I hover over the first image right here, we're going to give it the class of active based on some values that we're going to add in a second. So what we want to do is make sure that if we have 2 classes or 2 images with the class of active, we want to remove it from the first one, and then we want to continue on from there. So we're going to grab the first one because it's going to be a query set, and we're going to remove active from that image. So it'll make more sense once I paste in this next value. So just underneath this conditional here, so underneath that if statement, let's fix the indentation. We're going to go this dot, and we're going to get the value of class list. So this is going to be the image that we're hovering over. So we're going to take this image and we're going to say class list, and we're going to add the class list of active. So once we add that, we want to be able to grab the value of this featured image right here. So we're going to do document.get element by ID, and we're going to get it by the ID of featured. So we're going to grab that element, and then we're going to grab the value of, you know what, I'm actually going to comment this out because I feel like I didn't really explain that well. And I just want to get back to it so we can console it and see what it looks like. So we're going to grab this image right here, and we're going to change this attribute right here from this image to the one that we hovered. So if we hover over the third image, we're going to replace this value with shoe3.jpg. So we're going to say .src, and that's going to be equal to the current image that we hovered over. So this, and we're going to say this dot source. So we're going to grab this source value and throw it into here. So let's just see what that gives us for now. We'll refresh that. And as we hover, this value should change right here. So there's a small issue here. So right now, you'll notice that as I hover over, the opacity changes to all of these images. That's because right now the class of active right here, as we hover, gets added, but it doesn't get removed from the previous image. So that's what we're doing right here. So if I console out, let's actually just console out that class list here, or the query set of active images. We'll see what that looks like. And I need to throw in that console on the event handler. So it needs to be on hover. And now if I console that, we should see it. So when I hover over it, you see that we only have one item in our collection. So that's our JavaScript array. But when we hover over the next one, we're going to see 2 items with the class of active and then 3. So this list has the length of it is more than 1 right now, or more than 0. So this is why we wrote in that conditional. So we're basically saying whenever there is more than one image with a class of active, go ahead and remove the first one and add it in right here then. So it'll only have one image with a class of active. So once I add that, as we move through these, you'll notice that only the image that we're currently hovered over has that. So this is how we can create that slideshow. This is the very basic version of it. We're going to start enhancing this. And what we're going to do next is add in, we're going to style it, and then we're going to add in some arrows. So as we click to the right or left, we're going to be able to scroll through this, because once we start adding more images, it's going to get a little bit redundant. So let me just show you what that looks like once I add in a few more. So I'm going to paste this in a few more times, and we're going to start with preset 1 through preset 3. So we're just going to change these values, and we're going to say preset 1, and these are PNG files. So we'll just change that, preset1.png, and let's replace these 4 right here. Okay, so we have the new images here, and now if I refresh those, and these next images are going to be kind of big, so they're going to throw off our page a little bit, but we'll work on styling that. And I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Oh, those are JPEG still. So I thought those were PNG, but I guess those are JPEG. So I'm going to replace all of these, save that, and now that should work. So looks like we have one more that still doesn't have it. Preset.jpg. So it looks like the first one was a PNG. So I guess that was a little annoying, but we should have that fixed. And now as we navigate through these, there we go. So we're changing up the images, but right now we want to be able to limit those images. So just like in my demo here, if I open up my Django port, this is the other demo that we're going to work on in a minute. As we navigate, we want to see these arrows right here, and we want to be able to scroll through them. So we don't want to have to see all of them at once. We want to limit what we see and then just make our navigation a little bit cleaner. So let's go and minimize this right here. So close out the console. Okay, there we go. So that's closed out. So let's go ahead and add in the arrows. So we have arrow-left.png and arrow right. So if I look at my notes here, we added the hover effect. We changed up the icons. We want to first add in a wrapper for our slider. So let's take these images right here and add in a div. So we want to wrap the images for the thumbnails. And we're going to put this into a div with the ID of, let's see what I called that. So I called it slide-wrapper. So I'm going to throw that in and we're going to create a wrapper for the entire slider. So that's going to contain the wrapper itself, but we also want to add in a wrapper for the slider itself. So if I throw in another div, and that's going to be just above these images, we want to close that off underneath here. And if I space this, so we have a div that wraps all these elements, and then we have another div that wraps just the images. So once we have that, we want to add in the CSS. So I'm going to paste in the CSS and just go over it. So for our slider, we want to set, actually, let's throw in our slide wrapper first. So I'm going to paste that in. So we have slide wrapper, and for that, we're going to set the max width of 500. So we want our slide wrapper to be the same width as the actual image here. So we never wanted to extend the actual image. So we want to make sure that that's fit to frame. And then once we have that, we're going to display it as flex. So I don't know flex or CSS that well. I just know how to work with it. So I'm not going to get too much into this. You should either know this or just do research as you go along with it. But we're going to set the flex, and we want to set the minimal height to 1 pixel. And we want to make sure we center our items vertically, I believe. So flex just helps us with that layout. So that's what we're working with. And if I paste in the CSS for our slider right here, what we're going to do is we're going to set the width to the slider itself to 440. So we want to make it smaller than the slide wrapper itself because we need to add in some more elements into the slide wrapper for those 2 arrows. So we want to make sure that we don't break our alignment, that it actually fits in there. So for that, we're also going to display it as flex. So we want all of these items to be in line right here. So we want all of these to be in line, and we want to make sure that we have no overflow. So we're going to hide any elements that go beyond that. So our images will go further than that. So it's just going to hide those. So if I save that, I should be able to refresh it. And here we go. So we hide the overflow. So we want to add in those 2 arrows right here and then add in that navigation for that. So for the arrows, I have them in my images folder. So I'm just going to paste in the HTML for that. And that's going to be inside slide wrapper, but outside of the slider itself. So that's why we wanted to create some room here. So we're going to give that image the ID of slide left for the first one. We're going to give it the class of arrow, and we're going to connect it to arrow.png. So if we do that, I'm going to throw in another image to the right here. And that's going to be the same as this one. The only difference is that the ID is going to be slide right. So we want to add event handlers based on those IDs. And if I add the CSS, so for the CSS itself, I don't think I added that in yet. So my CSS is these 2 arrows right here. So for the arrow, we want to set the width to the image 30 pixels. We want to set the height of 30 pixels, and this is what the image is going to look like. And then for right, it's going to simply point to the right. So we're going to resize the images, and we're going to create that cursor and set the transition. So when we hover over it, we just wanted to change an opacity right here. So on arrow hover, we're going to change the opacity, and we're just going to enlarge the image a little bit. So once I save that, if I refresh it, there we go. So we have that. And remember, the layout is working because of that flex box that we added. So we added display flex and a few things in here. So if you don't understand that, look it up and look at my source code carefully, but that gives us our layout. So the next thing we want to do is add in some event handlers. So whenever we click on those buttons, we want to change the position of where we're at in this wrapper. So if I click on this, nothing happens at this point. So just underneath our for loop where we added the event handlers, and I think I'm pretty much done with the CSS until we start working on the complete layout. But after our event handlers were added, what I'm going to do is first query our button right and button left. So I'm just going to paste in the code, and I just used const for the variables, but just to keep some consistency, I'm going to call that let. And we called the first variable button right. So button right, we just query that by the ID, and that's a capital R right there. So whenever we click this button, we're going to query that, and one for button left. So now that we have the two elements, we want to add in the event handlers that handle the logic that occurs whenever a button is actually clicked. So on button right, we're going to start with, actually, I guess button left makes more sense here. So whenever button left is clicked, we're going to add the event handler. So add event listener, and we're going to listen for click. So for the function, let's just actually write that out so I don't talk faster than I think here. So we have our function, and what we're going to do is we're going to get that slider wrapper right here. So we're going to, on click, we're going to query this slider. So I'm going to do document.get item by ID, get element by ID. We're going to query slider, and we want to change the position of slider, and we want to move it on each iteration 180 pixels. On click left, we want to move it to the right. So we're going to say dot scroll left. Actually, for the left click, we want to scroll to the right. So scroll right, and we're going to move that. We're going to set that value to 180. So on click on the left button, we're going to get slider, and we're going to scroll to the right. That needs to be a plus equals, not equals. We're going to scroll by 180 pixels. So let's just try that. Actually, we probably should finish up this iteration because we're already on the very left, so that's not going to do anything. So now what we want to do is on right click here. So when the right button is clicked, we want to scroll left now. So we're just going to change that to a capital L, and we want to do minus equals 180. So we want to change the value on each click here, and let's try that. So we click it, we should scroll to the right. Let's see what's going on in our console. Okay, so I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to cut it. I'll have to fix this in editing, but just to reiterate this, because I was stuck on this for the last 10 minutes and I don't want to have to sit there and debug this with you. What's going to happen here is when the left button is clicked, we're going to set the value of slider and the value of scroll left to negative 180 pixels. So we're going to move it to the left whenever the left button is clicked by 180. And whenever the right button is clicked, or that right arrow, we want to set the value of scroll left, and we just want to add 180 pixels to the right. So we want to move to the right side. So that should set the values. And now if I refresh the page here and we scroll, so we're on the very left, we click the right button, we're going to move 180 pixels to the right, and we're going to keep moving until we get all the way to the right side. So eventually we probably should make this image disappear, but that's not the point of this video right now. But now if we click the left button, we scroll to the left until we're on the very left image. So that's how a user can navigate through this website. And essentially you'd want to make sure all your product images are the same, because now it's changing up our values. But there we go. So that added the two event handlers. So now what I want to do is work on the actual layout of our entire website, so we can just get this image to the right side here. So let's look at this. So we can center this thing right here and add in the product name, add to cart, and then I'll show those of you that are Django users how we can implement this dynamically into Django. So we're just going to get these values right here, and we're going to make these the output of whatever is in our database. So let's go ahead and finish up this layout, and then we'll move on. So if I go to our main page here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a container for all the elements in here. So within the body, we're just going to create a div, and I'm going to close off this div right here just so we don't screw up later here. Let's move, or let's hide our script here, our JavaScript. So we're going to create one div, and I want to indent everything inside of it. So this is going to be our main container. Now we're going to call that div content-wrapper. So we're going to give it the ID of content wrapper, or dash wrapper. And we also want to create two columns. So let's create a column for our slider right here. So we're going to wrap the featured image And we're also going to wrap, let's close that off at the end of our thumbnails. So we have our first column here, and I'm going to indent that, and that ends right here. And then we want to add another column for the products that are going to be added on the right side. So for that, I'm just going to paste in some HTML. So we're going to paste in a few values here. So let me just throw that into the right column. Remember, it has the class of column, and we just give it the H1 tag of awesome shoes. We set up a price, added a dash there, so just a bar to add a little bit of styling there, and we just put in some dummy content. And then we also added an input field with a bootstrap class of BT and dark, and it's just going to say add to cart, and it's not taking us anywhere. So let's go ahead and just refresh the page that we're working on. And these are our current values. So we want to add in the layout. So for the layout, I'm going to grab some CSS from my demo here. So we're going to grab some styling for this main content wrapper. So the content wrapper is the one that wraps all of the elements in our entire page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that just above featured, and we're going to display all the elements as flex. We're going to set flex wrap to wrap, justify content center, and align items. Remember, just look this up. There's a website called CSS Tricks that has a lot of good content on this. So I recommend you check that out. But if you Google this up, there's a lot of good channels, YouTube channels, and just articles on this. So we have the content wrapper, and we want to make sure we style our columns here. So just underneath content wrapper, let's paste in this right here. And all we're doing is setting the width of column to 600 pixels, and we're adding some padding. So now when I refresh this, we should see our entire layout appear how we want it, how the demo looks. So we want to set it like this. So I just want to add in some padding. So what I'm going to do is add in some padding to the body, and that should do it for the pure HTML or the front end side of things. So let's grab the body tag. We're going to add padding top. We're going to add in 100 pixels, and we should be good. So this is it for now. That's our slider. I'm going to advance a lot on this in future series or future videos, particularly in my e-commerce course, just because there's so much to do there, but this does it for the front end portion. Now let's go to the Django side. Now for the Django side, I'm going to show those of you that want to eventually build this out dynamically, what that code looks like. I'm not going to code along. I'm just going to go over that. So we have our Django project, and I have my server. It's already on. So I'm running on port 8000, and I added in just the product images to what my wife's website is going to look like. So she's just trying to do before and after pictures. So if you look at this, as I hover, the pictures show the original right here, and then the edits that her filters add. So this is what I'm trying to sell. And now if I go to the admin panel, and this is also going to be in the source code. So let's go to /admin. So we have our three models, and I'll actually show you the models file. So we have our images, links, and our products. So we're actually not going to work with links in here, I just realized, but let's drag in the project code for that. So I'm going to open that up, and that's sitting in my desktop. And I called this one Django_slider. So for this, we just have a simple Django project here. We created one app called products, and we created some static files. So if you look into my settings.py file, whenever we upload in the Django admin panel, we are setting the static files or the static file configuration within settings.py. So we're just making sure that everything goes into our static folder right here. And let me show you what the models look like. So the models are in products, and we have two models right now. So this is what's actually going to look like, or what's actually going to happen on her website. You don't need to pay attention to this. This is more customized. But in here, we just created the product model. It has a name, description, and a featured image. Now, there's multiple ways you can do this. You could just set one of these images to a featured image, but then we just have the price and an image URL. So I make that value dynamic. And the only dependency that we have for our Django project is going to be the Pillow library. So Pillow just lets us work with this image field, and you're going to see that in requirements.txt. So when you install it, just go to that file, make sure you have all those pip installs. Now, a product is going to have multiple images. So this is a many to one relationship. So we set that value with a foreign key relationship and we connect it to a product. Now that image, it technically doesn't need to have a name at this point. I just kind of set that for now, but we do have the image field right here. So when we upload an image, we also want to access that value dynamically. So this is where I make sure that that URL is dynamic and we don't get an issue if that model doesn't have a URL or an image in there. But we just set the value. So pay attention to these two. So it's a many to one relationship. That's all this looks like. Now in my template, so within my views, I just grab the first product and I pass it into the template. And within the template here, I just grab, so I have the same styling that we had in the demo I just built out, except for in this case, CSS is directly in my HTML template. But in here, if I compare it to the file we were just working on, so before we just built out these images by adding in the HTML tags. Now in here, we're first gonna grab the product for the featured image and we set that product image URL. So that was from our model field here. So I'll open that up and make sure that we can see that on the right side. So we're just accessing this value and that's the featured image. Now for the actual thumbnails, we're just looping through our product right here and we're grabbing all the images that are connected to that product model and we set the value or the source to that image URL. So that's all we change up and we just output them dynamically and that's about it. So outside of the actual product and price, we have the description and all our JavaScript is the same. So that's the only difference between a Django app and having that static. So if we go into our admin panel, here we have our product. I call it Solomita preset pack. We have our featured image. And then for our images right here. So if we go to our images file, we have all of our images. So remember, I just gave it a name. We probably don't need that. But for the demo, what I'm going to do is actually take away that model for this link right here. So I'm going to remove this so you don't have to see that because it has nothing to do with the e-commerce site or what you need. This is for my custom website, but that's about it. I think I covered everything. Let me look at my notes. Yeah, so that's it for the image slider for a static website and for a Django app. So I hope you enjoy that and I hope you like the style. I hope I didn't mess up too much, but it gets a little bit nerve-wracking just talking to the camera and not being able to cut as much as I would like to. So I'll see you guys in another video.